What's up, everyone? I thought I'd take you on another place that I believe is purportedly haunted here in Salina, Kansas. I don't think it's a cemetery. It's called Gypsum Hill Cemetery. I'll show you real quick. This is what it looks like. Now, I don't believe that all cemeteries are haunted, and most cemeteries are not haunted, but I haven't been to a lot of cemeteries throughout the United States who are really old, or which are really old. But this is a fairly new cemetery compared to a lot of older cemeteries throughout the United States. But I think it's a lot different in that there are some residual hauntings at the cemetery. And a lot of that is attributed to the fact that it wasn't always a cemetery. Sorry, there's people coming. So I will show you around. And tell you exactly what, how, or why I believe it's haunted. Now, once again, this is Gypsum Hill Cemetery in Salina, Kansas. As we enter the cemetery, this half of the cemetery, which is on the eastern or the north side, is fairly old, except for a smattering of recent graves and such. But the vast majority of this is the older part. I have not personally seen any apparitions on this side of the cemetery. But on this side, which is the more newer version, I have seen apparitions, and I've had people who were with me at the time who also saw apparitions. I do not think this part of the cemetery was originally a cemetery. I think the older part of the cemetery on this side was a cemetery for a lot longer than this side. And why I think this side has more haunting is because it wasn't always a cemetery. What I believe this area used to be was they used to have houses over here back in the 1800s. Old Victorian houses, because this is the older part of Salina, where many of the houses range from the early 1800s to a lot probably to the 1900s. They were built up into the 50s. But I believe in this area there used to be a lot of Victorian houses before they were all demolished, or the area was converted into, the branching and the expansion of the cemetery. When I was 16 and I had first moved to Salina, Kansas, I went to a friend's, I was invited to someone's birthday party by a friend, and we all, after we were done celebrating her dinner at the local Applebee's, her parents had rented her a limousine. Now, this is a funny story. And we didn't know where to go in the limousine. And we were, I had mentioned, why don't we go up to Gypsum Hill Cemetery and see if we can see anything. Well, we drove up here in the limousine, And we came through those cemetery gates, and we came right about here in the cemetery. And a limousine stopped at this point. Now, when it had stopped at this point, I said, let's all get out and see and this was nighttime, mind you. This was about 11 o'clock at night. Back then, the curfews weren't really enforced like they are now. So, back then you could go wherever you wanted without worry that the Salina Police Department would stop you. Anyways, we got about right here, and some of us got out of the car. And when we got, I would say about to this tree here, we all walked, and mind you, this is like late at night, so, and you can't see any light posts or anything around here, okay? So this place is pretty dark at night, you don't see any lighting or nothing. Well, when we got about right here, out of nowhere, out of the darkness, over around this area, we saw two Victorian girls standing right there. And they were iridescent blue-green, and they were glowing, okay? And they started laughing right over there. And then they started running down the road over here. So they were running down the road over here, laughing at us. And then by the time they got over here, they disappeared. Now, like I said, this is not the old part of the cemetery. And what I believe is that this plot of land over here had originally had some type of houses. Now, at 11 o'clock at night, this place is pretty damn dark. So there's no reason why, two girls dressed in Victorian clothes would be running down this pathway right here. So they started over there. They were laughing at us. They just materialized out of the darkness. I mean, it looked like they were, if you had a glow stick and you covered your whole entire body with the fluid of the glow stick, that's what they looked like. They were glowing like that. And they were laughing at us from over there. And then they started running down here, laughing and screaming, and like they were having fun. And then they kept running, and then by the time they got to that tree right over there, they had disappeared into the darkness. Now, like I said, this area I do not believe was a cemetery. I would say back in the 1800s, because when you think about the Victorian era was the early part of the 1800s to the 1900s, before the Edwardian period started in the 1900s. So most of these graves are fairly new. They don't look old. I mean, here's a mausoleum right here, but that looks like it could be from, I don't know, maybe the late 1800s to 1900s. But we saw these two girls. I mean, let's see, this grave, I don't know, it's covered. Yeah, it says born, well, that's 1990 to 1919 to 2011. So the vast majority of these graves are relatively new. But like I said, I think this part of the cemetery has more hauntings than, say, this part, because I don't think that people really hang out in cemeteries for the majority of their lives. There's a small mausoleum. Most people don't, like I said, most people don't hang out at cemeteries. So there's no reason for most cemeteries to be haunted unless, I don't know, you're in Louisiana, where it was common for people to hang out in cemeteries in the early part of those times. So I believe, yeah, this side of the cemetery is more haunted because it's relatively new, and I believe houses used to be over here, Victorian houses, and this was kind of like their yard or their plot of land that the families used to hang out in. So yeah, that's my belief of why this particular cemetery on this side is more haunted than that side. I've been out into the older part of the cemetery. Most graves are like early 1800s to, you know, 1900s to today, to the present. But I don't really believe that people had hung out, you know, in that portion as much as this portion. There's an old building way over there. It's called Marymount College. It was a Catholic college. I believe there's some hauntings there, but I think it had control over the cemetery over in this area. But like I said, when we saw the girls running down here, the Victorian girl ghosts, everybody piled back into the limousine and took off. So and like I said, I think this was like a family's land, their plot of land at some time. There might have been several homes here, but that was before my time, so they could have been torn down in the early 1900s or something to make room for the expansion of more graves. So anyways, I wanted to give you guys a quick idea of how this part of the cemetery is haunted. I think oftentimes when local ghost hunting groups come out here, they don't really pay attention to this section of the cemetery because they assume that the older part has more hauntings. But I'm always telling them, no, it's the newer part of the cemetery, because, you know, this was not always a cemetery. This was open land over here, and homes were built in this area, over in this part of the area. So it's really hard to say if there's hauntings over in the older part, because I've never really seen any, and I've been there late at night taking pictures and I've never seen anything. But like I said, over here in the newer part, I think there's like residual hauntings from people who had lived on this part of the land. So anyways, that was just a brief informative explanation of why I think a certain half of Gypsum Hill Cemetery is haunted versus another. And I hope it was interesting. I don't know if it was, but you know, to each his own. And should you ever come out here and do your own ghost hunting thing, which I don't contribute to any local ghost hunting groups because I disagree with their procedures and their methodologies and protocols and how they do it. But if you ever do, come look at the newer section, because I believe this newer half of the cemetery has the most haunting. So anyways, I'll talk to you guys later, and you guys have a good day. Bye.